17 segments, 21 disturbing hoarders, 7 levels. From grandmas with creepy obsessions to hoarding literally leading to death. This is the ultimate iceberg of some of the most bizarre hoarding buried alive moments to ever come on screen. Let's start at the tip. Disclaimer. Level 1. Piles clear to the ceiling. Meet Harold, the man who trusted things more than his own children. He appeared on Season 3, Episode 8 of Hoarders Buried Alive, where his struggle to decide what to keep and what to let go made the simple cleanup an impossible task. Being an electrician, Harold's love for collecting and buying new tools was always there. However, that hobby slowly sabotaged every aspect of his personal life, becoming an unhealthy obsession. The man has been married twice. First marriage left him with 6 children, but they too couldn't put up with his passions and slowly drifted away. And when the second marriage failed too, Harold stopped relying on people altogether.
Things started to get worse after my second divorce. Stuff just started piling up. I just couldn't keep track of it all. And the more stress there was, the worse the piles became.
The places that were meant for family began filling up with objects that wouldn't walk away. Boxes lined up, piles grew, and 10 years later, each room was sealed in clutter floor to ceiling. For 10 years, he actively pushed everyone out, yet one person refused to stay away: his 12-year-old daughter, Haley. Upon her visit, she wanted to stay the night, but despite living in a 5-bedroom house, Harold had no space left for her. Not a single bed, not even a corner on the floor. However, when Haley stopped visiting altogether, that silence hurt more than the clutter, so he finally reached out for help. That call brought clinical psychologist Dr. DJ Moran and the Hoarding Buried Alive team to Harold's door. When they tried to step inside, they could barely take 3 steps without tripping. The team saw a pattern. After so much isolation, Harold had clearly gone numb. His new normal was sleeping in a cluttered home with a high likelihood that something from somewhere would fall on him and he'd get buried under the mess of his own creation. However, Dr. Moran had another ace up his sleeve, a handwritten letter from Haley begging for only one thing: a chance to stay with her dad.
Dear Dad, you are the only person who can understand me. You are a wonder man and dad. You mean the world to me. It would be wonderful to finally be able to stay the night at our house. I love you more than any dad in the world.
Her words cracked something open, but for Harold, letting go of years of obsession wasn't that simple. Each time the team picked up an item, he argued for its usefulness. So April, his daughter, tried to ask a question that Harold couldn't dodge.
Are you going to use it within the next 30 days?
No, but the next 60 days I may.
When the answer came no, the item was gone. Family and friends joined in, and for 4 weeks they helped him clear the house. And when the last pile came down, Haley finally had a room at her dad's. Harold was finally rescued from his own mind. But what happens when someone spirals beyond saving? Doll hoarder. Some collect stamps, some collect coins. Joyce collected dolls until they took over her world. But she didn't start that way. Something happened that made porcelain feel safer than people. 48-year-old Joyce shared her home in Southern California with her sister Lisa, who had just moved in, and immediately discovered the house wasn't livable. But if Lisa was now there, couldn't she have gotten rid of the clutter? That's when Joyce's rules came in.
When you can't find things and everything is just so crowded against you, it's like the walls are closing in on you and it's just too much.
Even if the house had become a maze of boxes, plastic bins, and dolls staring from every corner, Lisa couldn't move a single item without Joyce's permission. It all began when her marriage fell apart. The silence that followed was unbearable, so she filled it with dolls. For her, every doll was a child she never had. At first it felt harmless, $1 or $2 for comfort, but each new one brought a smaller hit of happiness. So she kept buying more. However, the purchases didn't just stop at dolls. Over the years, she amassed almost 500 dresses, thousands of books, and enough craft supplies to run a store. However, this emotional substitution came at a cost. Her affection shifted from people to possessions, so her relationships and finances began to crumble. She had spent $60,000 on the clutter, and what's even more appalling was that she wasn't willing to stop even after losing her job. And as her bank accounts neared zero, reality finally broke through. That is when Joyce reached out to a psychologist, Dr. DJ Morin. But what he found wasn't just a creepy obsession, as her family had quoted. It was a lifetime of trying to buy the love she never got.
Well, I bought it to be happy, but then after it reaches a certain point, there's so much of it that being with it makes you unhappy.
As a child, Joyce never received gifts, so when she finally could buy something for herself, she couldn't stop. Since Joyce couldn't face the cleanup alone, Dr. Morin brought in professional organizer Danica Malley to help her. Along with her daughter Stephanie and a few friends, they began the gruesome process of decluttering. Joyce struggled to let go of even a single doll, often defending them as if they had feelings, while the people around her tried to teach her the emotional skill of releasing attachments. After 6 exhausting weeks, Joyce finally sold most of her collection, earning about $3,000. Although it wasn't much compared to the original amount she'd spent, it was still a step in the right direction. The right direction being away from the creepy dolls that keep staring at me. Level 2. Things versus family. What makes a mother abandon her own child? Well, in Kathy's case, it was a pile of absolute garbage. Episode 7 of Season 5 led us into Kathy's house and the mess she had created for herself. Kathy lived with her son CJ, but their place looked more like a landfill than a living space, with towers of papers, boxes lined up, and cans of expired food scattered everywhere. And because Kathy couldn't let go of the garbage, she ended up losing something far more precious: her son.
I'm not happy with it. I know my son is not. It's like a nightmare.
At just 12, CJ packed up and moved next door to his grandmother's house where he could finally breathe. This should have been Kathy's wake-up call, but she barely blinked. And rather than seeing loss, Kathy saw betrayal. To her, CJ hadn't escaped, he'd been stolen by Kathy's mother. These manipulative blame games went beyond typical hoarding behavior. There was something else causing it, something Kathy was trying hard to bury under the mountains of junk. And that was revealed when Kathy's brother was brought into the conversation. Their father had been a violent alcoholic. Their mother took the brunt of it, but Kathy wasn't spared either. She carried the same fear into adulthood. That trauma never healed. Instead, she coped by clinging to things as a substitute for safety. However, having a traumatic past doesn't excuse you from present responsibilities. 5 years passed, and poor CJ grew up believing that his mother had chosen garbage over him.
I hate the way that my mother acts. I am pretty mad at her over the whole situation because it really does feel like she is choosing the things over me. But I kind of guessed that I accepted that quite a while ago.
When he finally confronted her, Kathy denied everything. She insisted she never meant to hurt him, yet somehow in that confrontation, something changed. For the first time, she saw what her son had seen all along. And that's when she reached out to Dr. Julie Pike for help. Dr. Pike gathered Kathy's brother, son, and mother in one room with her. Every unspoken tension, past conflicts resurfaced, but this time, Kathy didn't hide behind the clutter.
Some people can block things out like you do. If I could block those things out, being by my father and seeing you being up and choked, I would block them out.
Finally, she was able to let go of everything she had been holding on to, and the house was restored to its original state. But even with the clutter gone, could a clean house ever undo the mess left inside CJ? Level 3. House full of dog feces. Feces on the floor, spoiled food in the kitchen, and air too thick to even breathe. Yet Beverly insisted it was still a clean and lovely home.
If I'm having a bad day and I go and buy something, the day feels better.
I'm sorry, but this makes me want to cry. It really does. I was just shocked.
Beverly lived alone with her 2 dogs in a modest house. However, after years of compulsive shopping and hoarding, there was nothing modest left in that house. Every room was drowning in filth, towering piles of trash, dog feces baked into the carpet, and a smell so strong it could knock you back at the door. Still, Beverly had no problem living in that quarantine zone of a house. That was until the trash broke the quarantine and started piling up in her yard. Neighbors could no longer bear the sight, but they waited, hoping she'd clean it up herself. Weeks passed, and the piles only grew taller, so someone finally called the police. It wasn't the first complaint. This was the 66th in 4 years, and this time the city police decided to act on their own. When they arrived, they began clearing the yard, but nothing could have prepared them for what lay inside. The door barely opened, and the house was literally decaying. Living there was a health risk, and that's when Constable Curtis Hoarder was assigned to the case.
Oh, that is a lot of feces, and that is in there good. How long do you think this has been in the house?
Well, it was cleaned up about a year ago.
He gave Beverly a final warning to clean up or the city would condemn the house. For the first time, Beverly realized this wasn't about clutter. It was about losing the last thing she owned, her home. So Beverly finally called a professional cleaning company for help. But when the cleaners arrived, they froze. The fridge was stuffed with rotten food crawling with maggots, and upstairs, piles of dog feces covered the floorboards.
When I opened that fridge, it hit me hard. The smell went right through my mask and everything. It was bad. I don't think she could have returned that fridge.
Therefore, they refused the job. In the end, Beverly was left alone, surrounded by everything she had hoarded in decades. With the threat of condemnation hanging over her head, she had no choice left but to face her own mess. Days later, Constable Curtis returned, and this time he could finally step inside. The trash was gone, and for the first time in years, there was a space to walk free. The episode ended there. However, Beverly's story didn't. In 2014, at the age of 66, tragedy struck once again. The ground floor of her Connecticut home, buried under years of hoarded debris, gave way, collapsing beneath her. Beverly was trapped in the basement with no air and no way out. She suffocated under the very weight of the life she couldn't release. And so, the house she once called home became her tomb. House that ate teeth. In the chaos of her collapsing home, Lynn's teeth were the last thing anyone could expect her to lose. Kyle and Lynn appeared on the 9th episode of Season 5, and even years later, viewers couldn't forget what they had seen inside their home. Every corner was buried in things they didn't need, things they forgot, and things they couldn't let go of. But it wasn't always that way. When Kyle met Lynn, he thought he had found peace. However, soon after the marriage, clutter turned into conflict, and conflict into decay. Each attempt to clean became a battlefield, accusations flying until silence settled over the same untouched piles. After years of this cycle, their home now resembled a landfill, yet neither would take responsibility.
I'm gonna lose my home and lose everything I own, and I don't know what I'm gonna do.
3 feet of just debris, and what's underneath it, nobody knows.
Everything is getting progressively worse.
But just how long could they keep living in denial and garbage? Everything has an expiry date, and theirs came stamped on an envelope of foreclosure. The mess they had created was finally catching up to them. And since they couldn't clean without bickering, the couple sought professional help. When Dr. Samantha Morrison stepped inside, the smell hit her before the shock did. Still, what disturbed her the most wasn't the mess, it was Lynn's slurred speech. When asked about it, Lynn muttered that she'd lost her dentures somewhere in the clutter. That was the moment the full scale of their chaos became undeniable. Dr. Morrison called in a team of cleaners.
I have lost my teeth.
So somewhere
Like around here, or my teeth.
in this area.
Yeah, or my teeth.
This is definitely the worst hoarding house I've seen.
As the crew worked, Lynn's discomfort grew. Every item tossed out felt like a piece of her prized possessions being stripped away. But with Dr. Morrison's steady reassurance and the threat of foreclosure hovering overhead, she somehow kept it together. However, it was the viewers who couldn't keep it together when, midway through the cleanup, Lynn's dentures were found, and she placed them straight into her mouth without even rinsing. That single moment said more than words ever could. It showed how detached she had become to hygiene. The kind that didn't just consume the house, but the couple inside.
I hope we can help move her forward, but I'm afraid she's going to really have difficulties if she doesn't continue with some therapy and change some habits.
The house was finally cleaned. But with patterns like theirs, no amount of cleaning could ever be enough. No matter how much was thrown out, they'd always find new ways to let the garbage back in. And if they keep arguing like they have been, Kyle better watch out, because I'm pretty sure Lynn's bark is no longer worse than her bite. Shot high. How could one traumatic event change the life of a man who once shaped so many others? Wayne was once a respected high school principal, calm and composed, but one tragic day at school changed everything. Now he lived between hordes and hordes of unwanted things. And when his cluttered home was shown on Hoarding's Buried Alive, viewers only had one question: what led to this?
Hoarding has diminished my life from being able to live to just being alive.
Trying to walk through all this.
The answer lay in Wayne's past. During his job, he had survived a school shooting. That incident left him with scars of PTSD, and that trauma triggered compulsive hoarding. Over time, his home became a barricaded fortress of garbage, meal replacement shakes, and bottles of rotten milk. What was meant to protect him from the world had instead trapped him inside it. Soon, his daughters stopped visiting. Conversations became confrontations, and the man who once inspired students couldn't even face his own family.
What do you need from your dad, Lauren?
I want to know why me and Rachel weren't worth your time and your effort.
You were worth my time and effort.
Then why didn't you put in the time and the effort?
When they asked why he wouldn't change, Wayne deflected the blame toward the world, the past, and the shooting. However, after 7 years of running from it, he finally called for professional help. Dr. Becky Beaton and a team of organizers arrived, finding not just a house in decay, but a man ready to reclaim his life. For the first time in years, Wade stayed through every breakdown, every painful memory unearthed in the process.
I hadn't thought that it was possible to see the floor, to walk up the stairs without fear of tripping or slipping. It was a miracle.
And slowly, room by room, the house began to breathe again. And hopefully, so did Wayne. Level 4. Pet found inside Hoarder's house. In the entire 8 seasons of the show, no other episode shocked viewers quite like this one. When cameras entered Darlene and Doug's home, the crew wasn't just documenting clutter, they were stepping into an actual nightmare. Darlene, once a sales associate, proudly admitted she had been a hoarder since childhood.
I consider myself a hoarder. As a small child, I remember shoving things into the playhouse. The playhouse became full, so it was no longer useful as a playhouse. And I still do this to this day.
But hoarding toys as a kid is one thing. Hoarding garbage as an adult is another. For over a decade, she hadn't cleaned a single corner. The walls were slick with mold, and a broken septic tank had flooded the floors with raw sewage. The air itself was poisonous, yet Doug, her husband and a music teacher, never stopped her. He said he was being supportive, but really, he was just too afraid to fight.
It reached the point that rather than walk through it, that we would go out the front door, down the sidewalk, just because it was unpleasant, to say the least.
By the time help arrived, the house was past saving. The city considered demolition, but a professional cleaning team stepped in to try. and what they uncovered left even seasoned cleaners speechless. Under a heavy dresser, they found something that stopped everyone cold: a mummified cat. But what horrified viewers even more was Darlene's reaction. She didn't scream, she didn't flinch. She simply explained calmly that the cat had been sick and 2 years earlier it had disappeared. After weeks of cleaning, the house was finally safe enough to walk through again.
There's so many times in this place where there was happiness, and I'm glad to be able to walk the length of it, or mostly beyond my control. It's where it is now.
And when it was over, the team had cleared out the filth, but not what caused it. Because for Darlene, the hoard wasn't just junk. It was proof that she'd never truly learned how to let anything go. Rat-infested house. From the outside, it looked like any ordinary suburban house, but from the inside, it was a rat-infested nightmare. Michelle had spent years hoarding anything she could get her hands on: food containers, paper bags, broken furniture, and over time, her collection turned into the perfect breeding ground for rats.
The hoarding pushed my children, son and daughter, and my husband away. My children, I told them all the time I love them, but they didn't want to come visit because the condition of my house. And that made me sad. That made me depressed.
By the time she finally sold the property, the damage was already beyond repair. The buyers, who had purchased it sight unseen, walked in expecting a quick renovation. Instead, they were met with a wall of stench so thick it was hard to breathe.
Oh, that inside the house is just totally disgusting. The smell is the part that you just can't explain. It's just garbage everywhere. It was just all clothes and everything.
Trash filled every corner, and the fireplace was overflowing with rat droppings. The infestation was so bad that even seasoned cleaners refused to enter certain rooms. They could hear the scratching inside the walls, the constant reminder that this wasn't just clutter, it was living creatures ruling over the clutter. At first, the new owners tried to save the place. They brought in exterminators, hoping to drive out the rats and start fresh. But when they returned weeks later, the site was worse than before. Every room was collapsing under years of rot, chewed wiring, and mold. The hoard hadn't just destroyed the home, it had eaten through its very structure. Yet there was still hope. After 6 truckloads of garbage were hauled away, the house finally stood bare, ready for renovation. And 2 months later, it was unrecognizable. The once rat-infested maze Michelle called home had been transformed into a livable space again. The investors had changed its fate, but it leaves one unsettling question. If they hadn't stepped in, would the house or Michelle have ever been saved? The most extreme roach infestation. You can't really imagine what millions of cockroaches sound like until you step into Seymour's house. In Philadelphia, a retired orthopedic surgeon named Dr. Seymour lived surrounded by mountains of clutter. Old boxes, newspapers, and broken tools stacked higher than the furniture itself.
This is my house, living room, storage area. This is like the graveyard of all the junk I have. Nothing in here is that important anymore.
But beneath those piles, something else was living too. Every wall, every surface, and even the plumbing had become a breeding ground for cockroaches. Oh boy, I wonder if there's another narrator available to do this one. The infestation was so severe that when his daughter-in-law once invited him over, it spread the insects into her home, forcing her to call an exterminator.
I haven't been over here in 7 years because the last time that he visited me, he gave me a full cockroach infestation in my home. And based on that, I knew that his home was an unsanitary place that I didn't want to take my family into.
How bad does a home have to get before the city steps in and takes it away from you? Seymour's 2-bedroom house had been his world since retirement. Now, at first, the hoard was harmless. Old medical journals, outdated gadgets, sentimental keepsakes. But as his isolation grew, so did the clutter. What makes a man ignore an infestation so overwhelming that it threatens his own health? He stopped driving, stopped cleaning, and eventually no one came to visit him. When Hoarding Buried Alive arrived to film, they found rooms so full that crews could barely open doors. The bathroom still worked, but every tile and pipe crawled with movement. Seymour insisted he could still shower fine even as roaches swarmed the drain. And yet the most disturbing part wasn't the bugs, it was how normal it had become to him. For years, Seymour's children begged him to clean. His daughter Jessica described how her father shut everyone out, convinced he was managing fine.
Embarrassed?
Yeah.
But you weren't embarrassed before?
Yes, that's why nobody ever came in. Yeah.
Right. But now we're here, and now you can't hide it anymore. And it has to be done. I mean, honestly, do you want the city to come in here?
No.
But when the city sent a formal condemnation notice, the illusion broke. The home was officially declared uninhabitable, and Seymour had weeks before everything he owned was gone. Cleanup teams arrived in hazmat suits using industrial vacuums and foggers to clear layers of roaches carpeting the floors. As they lifted old furniture, entire colonies scattered beneath their feet. But would saving his house mean confronting the one thing he'd avoided for years, himself? By the end of the episode, professional therapists and cleaners managed to clear most of the infestation, but Seymour's struggle wasn't just with the roaches, it was with letting go. The cleanup may have saved his home, but the deeper battle to reclaim control from a lifetime of hoarding was only beginning. House of Vermin. What happens when denial turns a home into a quarantine zone? In Texas, Kay, a retired teacher, lived inside a house so contaminated that city officials were just days from condemning it. To her, it was just clutter, but to everyone else, it was a biohazard site crawling with rats, roaches, and decay. Kay bragged that her house was a treehouse style, but then turned around and completely trashed it. For decades, she filled every inch of her house with things she swore she might use one day: books, trinkets, dishes, even expired food. What began as collecting had turned into a fortress of waste that hid nests of rats and cockroaches beneath.
I have a whole great big huge bowl full of cockroaches here simply because I haven't cleaned up. They fell in and can't get out. And I mean, there's a couple still alive in there. So if you don't mind, I'm going to put the pan back on top.
But how do you save someone who refuses to believe that they need saving? When the Hoarding Buried Alive crew entered with cameras and respirators, the smell hit first. The thick air of rot and animal waste. The kitchen was layered with spoiled food, old grease, and hardened bread that crumbled like stone. Her daughter Shannon tried to intervene, but each attempt ended in shouting or tears.
Stay away from me. Just stay away from me. Because right now I can't talk to you. Just stay away.
You're mad at me.
Stay away from me. Don't say a word to me. I don't want to talk to you right now. I don't care about the program. I don't care about cleaning up. I don't care about anything. Just stay away from me right now.
The city had already issued its final warning: fix the property or lose it entirely. Biotech crews in protective suits stepped through the front door and stopped cold. The smell was so strong it burned their throats. Underneath stacks of books, they found gnawed holes, evidence of rats digging for years. The infestation was so advanced that technicians believed multiple species were nesting there. The team called it a free-for-all for pests. A therapist tried to intervene. She showed Kay how her attention drifted mid-conversation to protect a single figurine, the exact moment her anxiety took control. It was a clinical snapshot of compulsive hoarding behavior. If she couldn't part with one ornament, how would she survive losing an entire house? By the final day, the team had removed tons of contaminated material, yet the city's deadline loomed. The floors were cleared, but the emotional wreckage remained. Kay's marriage had fractured, her health was failing, and the home she fought to defend had nearly turned against her. Father and son hoarders. In Cincinnati, a condemned property exposed how addiction to hoarding can turn into a family crisis under city law.
What are you gonna do about it? I need somebody
Father John and his son Joseph had filled every corner of their home until there was nothing left to live in. No working kitchen, no usable bedrooms, just pathways carved through walls of junk and trash. His property had been officially declared a fire hazard and a public health violation. Inspectors found blocked exits, exposed wiring, and combustible piles stacked to the ceiling. The property had become so unsafe that the city threatened jail time if the pair didn't clean it. But this time, the stakes weren't just about losing a home, they were about losing a child.
I just gave birth to mine and Joseph's baby. I do love Joseph. I love Joseph a lot. But the hoarding is like living in a garage full of a lot of stuff.
2 men, 1 house, and a deadline that decides whether a newborn stays home or goes to foster care. John had spent years collecting and repairing electronics, stereos, old TVs, VCRs, anything with wires. And for Joseph, that pride was now inherited. Outside, neighbors complained of foul smells, rodents, and junk spilling into the yard. On confrontation, Joseph snapped back that what's inside his home was nobody's business. When county inspectors arrived, they found piles of trash pressed against animal cages stacked 3 high. Inside were 12 cats trapped so long that waste nearly buried them. Sorry, Joseph, but animal definitely qualifies as somebody's business. Yet John claimed they were fine, mistaking their cries for contentment. As cleanup crews arrived, the generational tension broke open.
Hold on. Hold on. Like motors, electric motors. Tell Jess to come here, he's got to go through this.
Joseph's girlfriend, Cheryl, was days away from giving birth. They were warned that if the house wasn't cleaned before the baby came home, Child Protective Services would step in. But would they finally face their addiction, or would history repeat itself before the next generation even began? Tension inside the family was just as toxic. John insisted the city exaggerated the danger, while Joseph argued it was time to change. Decades of resentment came spilling out with every trash bag removed. By the end, cleanup crews had cleared several rooms. John served jail time, and the property was seized by the city in 2017. Reddit users who tracked the case in 2023 confirmed Joseph had remarried and maintained stable housing, while John was last known to be in public housing as of 2020. Level 5. Worse than a haunted house. In South Dakota, Sylvie Bainen's duplex looked normal from the pavement. Inside, it was drowning in everything she couldn't throw away. It was difficult to move or even breathe, as every step stirred the dust of 2 lost decades. Years of buildup had turned the house into a biohazard zone. The hoarding began after Sylvie broke her leg. While she healed, her husband grew distant, and loneliness filled the house before the boxes did. Sylvie's sons, Mark and Brett, tried to intervene, especially after the poor health condition of their father.
My dad, I think, has had some health problems, and now he's not exercising because flipped the remote. That's all he's doing, and just worried gonna die in the basement.
When Mark's fiancée finally saw the house, she couldn't take it anymore and contacted Hoarders Buried Alive. When the cleanup team arrived, the house seemed to resist them. Entire rooms had vanished beneath years of accumulation: furniture, dishes, books, even a kitchen table Mark hadn't seen since childhood. Outside, a trailer sat packed to the roof with clothes she hadn't touched in years. The sink, once white, was now filled with thick black sludge that never drained. Yet Sylvie insisted she was organized and knew exactly where everything was.
Okay, well, this is my kitchen. And I know that it is pretty stacked up of stuff, but everything is fresh. You're not gonna find any moldy bananas or anything.
To her, clutter wasn't chaos, it was kindness. If someone needed clothes or boots, she said they could have them. I'm a saver, not a hoarder. Yet saving had become its own form of burial. Family tension boiled over, and at one point, Sylvie shoved Brett, shouting. Her anger wasn't about cleaning, it was about her control slipping away. The house was hers, and she wasn't about to let anyone take it away. Even as the show's psychologist warned that her home endangered the family, Sylvie saw herself as misunderstood. She owned 20 rental units, held multiple jobs, and pointed out proudly that she wasn't like the other hoarders. Later, Sylvie said that the therapy had helped and she no longer even wants to go shopping. When the cleanup finally ended, her sons returned. For the first time in decades, light moved freely through the rooms, as if the house itself exhaled after holding its breath too long.
When I first walked inside, it was nice. Seeing the table took me back to probably 1983 or 84, and it's just really nice. It was worth the fights we had on cleanup day.
For a moment, it was about a family remembering what home was supposed to feel like. Holding mom hostage. For 65-year-old David, the dream of becoming a rock star never faded. Only the surrounding space did. What began as a small collection of guitars and clothes grew into a full-scale occupation of his 93-year-old mother's home. Louise had lived in that house for more than 6 decades. Family dinners, holidays, and neighbors once filled the rooms.
I never really considered myself a hoarder. It's just every once in a while I go to the local dump and just something is so beautiful it catches my eye and I just have to have it.
But things began to change when David was forced to leave the Navy after an accidental overdose. His problems progressed after his failed marriage. Now every path of the house is blocked by David's belongings: bicycles, stacked boxes, racks of clothes, and even a phone booth wedged in the hallway. David insisted that he'd been taking care of his ill mother, but it was quite the opposite. Her living room has become a storage area, and her bedroom a corner cluttered with bags collected over the past 17 years.
I've never asked David to leave home. I guess because I'm his mother and feel he needs somebody or someplace to live. I would hate to see him out on the street.
How did a lifelong family home turn into a storage unit? The closet in David's room had collapsed under the weight of clothes gathered from thrift stores, flea markets, and clearance bins. He says he doesn't like repetition and needs variety, but the result is a room where nothing can move. David says he's just creative, that artists need things around them. He enjoyed transforming women's skirts into ponchos, layering thrift store finds like stage costumes that no one ever saw. But creativity blurred into compulsion. Louise, careful with every step, explained she can no longer invite anyone over. The clutter makes walking dangerous, and the fire department has already issued warnings about accessibility violations. The house, by legal standards, was no longer safe. At what point does collecting become confinement?
And the problem is, well, when you do sell stuff, you're still bringing stuff home here. You know, you've got to stop bringing the stuff in because you won't have enough time in your life.
When the cleanup team arrives, David resists. He insists nothing be touched without his review. He claims everything has value: records, jackets, magazines. Family members urge him to let go, but every suggestion feels like a threat. The standoff reaches its peak when Christine confronts him. She tells David he's trapping their mother, not protecting her. The exchange grows tense. David accuses her of disrespect, shouting that no one understands his system. Behind him, Louise sits silently, unable to reach the kitchen she once used daily. Health officials document multiple hazards: blocked exits, unstable stacks, and reduced airflow due to overfilled rooms. Each item David defends adds another risk to his mother's safety. By the end, what remains is a clear equation. One man's obsession has turned his mother's home into a hazardous zone, a space where sentiment has replaced safety and family ties are buried beneath decades of accumulated possessions. The Donald Trump of hoarding. He once sold front row seats to everyone else's dreams until his own life became standing room only. For 40 years, Mike was a successful ticket broker in Massachusetts. He made more than $200,000 a year and could get anyone into any concert, game, or show. But when the internet changed everything, his business disappeared overnight. The man who once handled sold-out arenas now lived alone in a one-bedroom condo buried under 6 feet of rubbish. The crowd was gone, but the clutter stayed.
It was revolting
disgusting, horrendous. It stank. It was filthy.
Mike's situation is probably the worst that I have ever had to tackle.
His brother Steve called him the Donald Trump of hoarding. If you can possibly imagine, that wasn't praise. It was disbelief at the empire of garbage Mike had built. Newspapers towered against the ceiling, garbage bins lined the walls like insulation. He no longer walked through his home, he slithered over the piles, sleeping on top of them like a dragon guarding its hoard. The bathroom hadn't worked in 3 years. He kept rows of jugs filled with urine stacked along the floor. Rotting food and mildew turned the air into poison. His kitchen is filled with expired food sealed beneath a crust of grease and mold. The dining room table never assembled, just another surface lost to the pile. Now at 59, he's living with a rare form of cancer, and doctors have warned he can't undergo surgery until the hoard is gone.
A mass was found during a CAT scan. It's cancer, and it's a cancer that's very rare.
He needs a clean, healthy, safe, accessible place to return to. He can't go back to an unhealthy, unsafe, inaccessible place. He could die. This is really serious.
The cleanup crew arrives, but Mike refuses to cooperate. Mike blocked every attempt to move a box or touch a paper, throwing objects toward workers and shouting that they were stealing from him. Even the psychologist refused to enter, calling it a live biohazard. Dr. Beaton halts the process, warning that if Mike doesn't comply, he'll die before surgery. He only had 2 weeks, time was running out, and Mike was the one pressing fast forward. When family members stepped in, there's a glimmer of progress. They convince him to step outside, but his condition turns every moment into resistance. Each box becomes a battle, every discarded newspaper a small defeat. Steve stood in the doorway and told his brother that the stuff was killing him faster than the cancer ever could.
My fears for Mike is that he can't let go of the contaminated things, and that he puts himself at risk, and that he may end up getting a life-threatening infection after surgery.
That broke something. Mike didn't surrender, but he stepped aside long enough for light to hit the floor again. In the end, cleanup resumes, but only under family supervision. Whether Mike lives long enough to see his home restored depends not on his illness, but on his ability to let go of it. Level 6. House owned by roaches. Oh, good. More roaches. Great. If a psychologist couldn't recognize her own disorder, what hope did anyone else have? In Arizona, Celia's home looked calm from the outside. Pale stucco walls, trimmed bushes, the kind of place you'd expect a professional to live in. Inside, it was something else entirely.
I'm a psychologist, but I'm also a hoarder, filling up my room, filling up other rooms, filling up tables, everything.
Celia was a psychologist trained to understand the human mind, yet her own mind had built her a cage. Every surface was buried under rubbish, food, and old papers. The air moved in slow, heavy waves, and then there were the roaches. Millions of them. The infestation was so severe that exterminators described it as alive. Roaches crawled over food supplies, inside clothes, and across Celia's bed at night. Ow! Frick off. The sink was clogged with stagnant water that had turned into a breeding ground for mosquitoes. Even her pets had become part of the ecosystem, the litter box overflowing, feces blending with the layers of decay. Celia insisted she could handle it, but the smell said otherwise. The contradiction is sharp, a psychologist unable to confront her own compulsion. The irony of her profession made the episode almost unbearable to watch. Celia's son explained that this issue started when their parents got divorced and the father moved out. She felt so neglected and lonely and began to stuff the home with everything.
I can't sleep one night without roaches crawling on me. I can't go any amount of time without roaches falling off the ceiling onto me or my mom. I wish I could move out but at the same time, I don't feel like I could leave her alone.
Her family called for help only after exterminators refused to enter without hazmat gear. Her worried son Daniel refers to her home as being owned by roaches. The crew had seen roaches before, but not like this. One exterminator admitted that he had never seen anything this bad in a house where someone still lives. When the cleanup began, Celia resisted every attempt to throw anything away. She argued that the insects didn't bother her, claiming they were just part of life. The experts froze. There was no clear path forward without risking health violations. Even the show's psychologist hesitated to enter. She grabs at trash bags, pulling them open to rescue items already crawling with insects. Eventually, exterminators started sealing off sections of the house just to breathe. Celia watched in silence, arms crossed, still convinced she could fix it herself. Her family stood outside, unable to recognize the woman who once helped others confront their fears.
I didn't really have that high of expectations because I was very disheartened after that day.
I just want her to have a better quality of life. I don't know if realistically she wants a better quality of life.
In the final inspection, Celia's home was declared structurally safe, but psychologically unstable. So the question remains, if she can't face her own environment, how can she help others escape theirs? Jailed twice because of his extreme hoarding. On the edge of a quiet rural town, county authorities return to a house they've already condemned twice before. The yard looks less like a property and more like a scrapyard. Broken furniture, rusted bicycles, and collapsing sheds forming a maze of debris. At the center of it all is Donnie, an ex-Marine who has spent 30 years trapped by his own collections. He's already served 2 jail sentences for violating health and zoning codes, yet nothing has changed. Each time he's released, the hoarding begins again. Bigger, denser, more complicated to contain. Now the county has issued one last warning: either clear the property or face arrest once more.
The county or whatever has just got me under the thumb, and they're just trying to push me down and down and down as hard as they can.
But what pushed him to such extremes? Donnie's obsession began after his children moved away. The quiet left behind became unbearable, so he replaced it with objects. Duplicates of tools, toys, and thrift store finds he'd never use. Inside, rooms have lost their function. In one corner, piles of thrift store finds, old radios, lamps, and unopened packages reach almost to the ceiling. The clutter isn't limited to the home. When the piles grew too large for the house, they even split into the yard, where chickens and goats roam freely between rusted appliances. In Donnie's mind, he's created his own comfort zone. However, that comfort came with consequences. As the problem spread further, neighbors started complaining about rodents and the smell.
It's been an ongoing eyesore to the community. The local people are very upset. They feel they come here to enjoy the beautiful scenery, the waterfront property, and then to come and have to see such a junkyard. It should be cleaned up.
With each new complaint, the county's patience thins. The sheriff explains that Donnie's property now violates more than a dozen local ordinances. If he refuses to clean up again, his third arrest could result in the permanent loss of his home. What happens when your need to collect becomes the very thing that takes your freedom? Dr. Rebecca Beaton said that she had to get to the root of his compulsive hoarding and help Donnie overcome his past traumas that he faced in the first Gulf War. When cleanup crews arrived, Donnie's frustration erupted. He shouted at his friend Joe, who tried to throw away everything with good intent. The team uncovered piles stacked head high, clothing, electronics, old newspapers, all rotting under layers of dust. Out back, among the wreckage, they found his goats picking through rubbish. It was no longer a hoard, it was a landfill that breathed. The county gave him one last ultimatum, giving him 2 to 3 weeks to clear the rest of the piles. By the episode's end, the property looked marginally better. The goats were gone, the path to the front door finally visible. Level 7. The house that killed their mother. The show is no stranger to emotional stories, but this one was different.
my God.
Amy.
No! Shh. Oh my God, how did she live like this?
Amy.
How?
In season 4, it wasn't just a home being cleared, it was the aftermath of a life that had already come to an end. From the street, it looked like a typical suburban home, a quiet house with peeling paint and a mailbox stuffed with letters. But step inside and you realize it wasn't even a home anymore, it was a tomb of memories. Amy, Cheryl, and Jimmy hadn't been inside since their mother died here, alone at 65. They thought they were coming to sort her belongings. Instead, they were walking into the evidence of how she lived and how her life ended.
I know that house did kill her. I know for a fact there's so much black mold in it. I couldn't stay in there longer than 2 or 3 minutes because it was making me physically sick.
For decades, Cynthia had filled every corner with clutter: food, papers, broken furniture, even appliances that hadn't worked in years. Refrigerators still plugged in were swollen with mold, crawling with dead insects. Roaches moved like a living carpet across the kitchen floor. Rats had built nests inside old boxes. The smell clung to everything, and even with hazmat masks, the crew could barely stay inside. The siblings thought they'd come to clean, but what they were really doing was uncovering the truth. Each pile told a story. Unopened mail, expired groceries, empty cans. It wasn't just hoarding, it was a slow kind of disappearance. A woman swallowed by her own things piece by piece. This was how she'd lived. How had no one seen it happen? When the cleanup began, the emotions hit harder than the smell. Amy broke down as her mother's belongings were thrown into dumpsters. Cheryl whispered that it felt like erasing her all over again. Psychologist Dr. Julie Pike warned the family they weren't just grieving their mother, they were grieving who they thought she'd been. The house was her final secret, and now they had to live with knowing what it kept. The cleanup slows when the crew finds a refrigerator sealed shut. When they pry it open, everyone steps back. Inside, mold, maggots, and half-eaten meals that turned to sludge years ago. Hours later, with one wall finally cleared, daylight cut through the dust like a blade. For the first time, they could see across the living room, and it wasn't relief they felt, but shame. They hadn't known it had got this bad. They hadn't visited enough. Therefore, the question shifted from how she lived like this to how did we not stop this? Amidst the chaos, they found something worth saving. It was their mother's nursing school degree that she'd wanted her son to hang on the wall.
My mother graduated from college when she was 38 years old from nursing school. And she said she wanted her diploma found, and she wanted him to hang it on the wall.
When the last truck pulled away, the siblings stood in silence. The rooms were empty now, but not clean. Grief hung heavier than the dust ever did. The biohazard crew called it a success, yet no one there felt like they'd won. And that's how one person's denial turned her home into a living grave. If this collapse of control made you rethink what humans can live through, watch this video next.